Yeah, good afternoon. Well, again, yeah, this is our third class, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Android development intermediate track in KodeCamp. Yeah, so my name is Kate Gratton, as you know. So today we're going to be looking at responsive design principles, right? This is it's actually a very important topic, right? Because as intermediates, yes, you know how to get on your XML, you know how to start, putting out the designs, you know how to bring in your image views. You can actually see a design and say, okay, fine, I'm going to actually use linear layout here. I'm going to use relative. I'm going to use constraints, right? But over time, right, you get to understand that it's not just about what you can do; it's about how you do it, right? So that's why we're actually going back to looking into responsive design principles. And of course, when we're talking about responsive design, we're talking about designs that get to scale, right, regardless of the screen size. They get to still look, visually appealing, right? And, so that's basically that. So we're going to brush that, and then we'll just quickly rush back to the project, the code we were working on the last time. Yeah, of course, it's actually a very long one, right? And I'm not sure I wanted to finish up the XML. The truth is, if we actually want to do that in class, it's going to really take much of our time. So, of course, we're going to just go back to it, right? And then the code is going to be available on GitHub for you to go through. And then we'll just focus on the logic of having to work with constraints. Well, first of all, let's run through what we have for today as quickly as possible. And then, of course, we'll have a conversation after the class, right? So, okay, that's just that. So, responsive design principles, right? Yeah, so we're going to look at a few of them, right? But not, yeah, a few of them, a few things, a few best practices, right? That you need to know about building a responsive design. Okay. So yes. So first of all, the first of there is when you want to work on responsive design is to make use of constraint layouts, right? Constraint layout is actually well suited for creating responsive layouts, okay? Because it allows you to define relationships between your UI elements, right? And adapt their positions and sizes based on the constraints. So their size, their position is not based on the parent layout or how big the screen is per se. No, based on the that you have set right on them. So you have to utilize guidelines, chains, ratios to actually create adaptable work designs, which we listed some of these things out right in I think in our last class. Okay. So the second thing when you want to create responsive design is to provide different layouts, right? Now it's you need to be able to create alternative layout resources for different screen sizes and orientations, right? For example, you could use resource qualifiers like this layout SW for 600 dp for larger screens, right? Or you can use the layout land, that's for landscapes, right? For landscape orientation. So you can actually provide alternative resources that get, served to the user based on a particular screen size or orientation. So it basically you're just designing layouts that will make the most of the available space. Because think about it. Let's say you just have just two buttons, or let's say two text views, two buttons, one image view in a portrait layout. Now, how would it look on a landscape? You just have a lot of space on a landscape. So how can you utilize that, right? So providing different layouts, right, also helps you to design responsively, right? Now, the next one is to utilize dimension resources, right? So you need to define dimension values in your dimensions folder. You need to have a dimensions folder, right? Which is in your values folder, which is in your resources folder, okay? You need to define dimension values for your spacing, for your padding, for your margins, for your text sizes, right? So use different dimension values in your resource qualifiers to adapt these values based on the screen sizes. So don't try as much as possible. Don't just say 48 dp, right? You just take an image, you say 48 dp. No, store that in a dimension folder, right? In a dimension file, right? So that it's able to adapt to screen sizes. So it reads 48 dp, right? Because it's not hard coded, because it's actually in a file. So in a larger screen, it reads it and is able to calculate that with respect to that what screen size. So utilize that, right? Don't just have hard coded dimensions, right? You should store them in a dimension what file. Okay. Now also use responsive text sizes, right? So your text sizes, which is SP, which of course the measurement SP. So use your SP units for text sizes. So this actually ensures that it helps to ensure that they remain readable, okay, and adapt to the user's system font size preference, right? That's why you should also use the SP unit, right? I've actually seen somewhere. I actually wondered how, because I wondered how he learned using DP for in a text size, even with the one in there, right? It was just weird. Okay, so use scalable images. So you should provide images in multiple resolutions and sizes, right? Remember, we're talking about what responsive design. You should provide images in multiple resolutions and sizes. Your MDPI, your HDPI, your SHDPI, you have the SXHDPI, and you have the XXXHDPI, right? This ensures that your images look, they kind of look better, right, on different what screens. And it's also very, very advisable that you use vector graphics, that's your SVGs, right, for icons, right? Try not to use PNG for your icons. Use SVG for your icons whenever was possible. Okay. Now, adaptive layouts. So you also need to design layouts that will adapt to different screen dimensions, right? And here, basically, what you need to do is to prioritize your content based on importance, right? Prioritize your content based on what importance, and you should also consider how your UI element should rearrange as the screen sizes what changes. Remember, we're talking about responsive design. So when your let's say it gets smaller, when the screen gets smaller, you need to know, okay, fine, at this size, at this screen size, what content is more important, right? You must not display everything. For example, if you're looking at responsive design from a web point of view, right? What you see on a desktop, right? When you open a website with your laptop, right? What you see on a desktop is different from what you see on a mobile. Some things are taken out, right? And then content is prioritized based on importance, right? So that's something very key that you should also know. Now, the next one is using scroll view and nested scroll view. Of course, I'm sure you make use of this, right? Because you need to use that to create a scrollable content when the screen size is actually limited, right? So this just ensures that your users can access all the content, especially on smaller screens, right? So I don't think I need to talk more about that. Now, fragments, right? Your fragments usage, I also believe you make use of fragments. So fragments, you need to use fragments to create more like a modular UI component that can adapt independently to different screen sizes, right? So some of these things will actually play around with them, right? And then handling landscape orientation. So you can design your layouts that work well in both portrait and landscape orientations, right? So you can utilize the layout land for landscape mode and then adjust your component placement as needed. I think that's one of the, I'll probably show you that, right? But something you can actually do. So it's actually very simple stuff to do. Then, of course, test on different devices. Very important. Test on different devices as regularly as possible, right? So, of course, if you're using an emulator, you can play that. You can even play around with that. So, regularly test your app on various emulators and physical devices that has different screen sizes, densities, orientations, right? So you can basically identify issues and refine your layout accordingly, right? Maintain consistency, right? So your UI elements and the interactions should be consistent across different layouts. You need to try to maintain that. So when you're using your buttons, your text fields, your navigation, they should have a similar look and behavior regardless of the screen size, regardless of the orientation, whether it is landscape, whether it is portrait. Okay, so you need to strive to maintain consistency. Now, for the accessibility considerations, you basically need to just ensure that your screen, your responsive design remains accessible. Okay, so you have to test it with screen readers. You can also consider text-to-speech feedback, right? So you need to make sure that your design is accessible, right? And then also ensure that your touch targets are appropriately sized. So when we talk about touch targets, of course, you need to consider the thumb, your thumb. So when your button is too slim or too small, right? It's going to be difficult for the user to actually click on it, right? It also should not be too big, right? So that's basically touch target. So you need to make sure they are appropriately sized across whatever screen, right? So that's basically accessibility considerations. Then, of course, you need to follow material design guidelines. These are also very important, right? I think I'm going to share that with us. I'm just going to put that together and share with us. You can just read that off, right? Follow material design guidelines, right? They have guidelines for responsive layout and components, right? So that's something you need to follow on. And of course, the last thing is relative sizing and alignment, right? So you need to use relative sizing on your views. When I talk about relative sizing, I'm talking about wrap content. I'm talking about match parent. I'm talking about match constraint. That's 0 DP, right? It's not always. It's actually best, right, to make use of that rather than because if you're using constraint layout, you necessarily don't need to actually have hard-coded figures, right? Because you could just set a guideline and set this and constrain your image view to a particular guideline, vertical or horizontal, and it stays that way, right? It doesn't even, you don't need to size it. You don't need to say, okay, fine, my image should be 48 dp, it should be 58 dp, right? That's just, not that you cannot do it, right? But try to use relative sizing, right? Wrap content, match parent, match constraint. Match constraint is 0 DP. So try to use that. And also alignment constraints to ensure that your UI elements adapt to various screen sizes. So these are just basic stuff about basic responsive design principles that you should take into, you need to actually look at them whenever you are actually designing, right? So don't think that just because you've used constraint layout alone, right, you've put up stuff, and then you're fine. No, you'll be shocked that when you test it on some devices, your design will look just look awkward, right? It will look awkward. So take note of that. Okay. So that's that. So with this now, here comes your task 2, right? So on a new branch called FT Responsive in your notebook app UI, which you have done on a new branch. Remember, I said we're going to use this notebook app to learn everything we need to learn, right? We're going to go back to using the MVVM. We'll run that. We're going to talk about dependency injection. We're going to learn about testing, a lot of these things. We will use this notebook app right, to implement all these things, your room and every other network calls and everything. We're going to use this notebook app, right? And of course, when we are done with it, it's something you can use, something you can use by yourself, it's something you can decide to upload on Play Store if you want, right? So so on a new branch called FT Responsive in your notebook app UI, create a landscape version of the app with a slightly different look and feel, right? Create a landscape version of the application with a slightly different look and feel. So it's very simple, right? Should I say? You're intermediate, so you can figure things out, right? But basically, just go to rest, like click, and do some stuff. Yeah, it's very simple. Then make sure you adhere to the principles we have actually talked about. So I want to see these principles, most of them play out in your code, right? So I want to see your dimension resource, right? I want to see your scalable images. I want to see your scroll view when necessary, right? I want you to handle landscape orientation, which is what I just asked you to do, right? Maintain consistency, right? Your sizing and alignment, utilize your dimension, like I've said that already, your responsive text, right? So apply these practices now in your notebook app UI, right, on a branch called FT Responsive, right? I will talk about the deadline for that, right? But you need to that hopefully before, I'll just let you guys know on the Discord, right? Okay, so that's basically that, right? That's basically that. So up next, let's go back to what we were working on, right? I don't know if you have a question, you can just ask while I switch to Android Studio. If you have a question, just ask while I switch to Android Studio. Okay, so I think there are no questions. Okay, so let's go to Android Studio, right? So and try to just finish up what we were working on, right? So what I did, like I said, I'm going to share the code with you guys on GitHub. I'm going to put it up on GitHub, and then you can pick that up. Because having to build the UI here, right, it's going to really take a lot of time, right? To take a lot of time. So I didn't want to do that. So I just finished up the UI, so we can now check out how to, how this thing is actually going to work. So let me just share. Let me share my screen so you get to see what we have. I think I'm just going to share. Okay. Okay. So just give me a second. Okay. So confirm you can see my screen. You can see both the emulator and the Android Studio. Please confirm. You can see that. Um, can you see my screen? Okay. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so this is basically the UI, right? So this is just the activity main, and then we have a cover layout and we have a description view, right? So now if you see, you have this land here, activity underscore main, we have the landscape view, right? We have the cover layout landscape. So that's basically, so when you do what I said, you have something like this, right? You have something like this. So that's basically that, right? So this is the landscape view, right? So and just so you go play around with yours, right? So we have this for the activity main when you run this, and then we have the cover layout, right? That land. We have the layout, and then we have the description view. So I'll upload the code for you. You can just go and check it out, right? So what we want to do, we want to be able to, use some animations and transition to kind of view this in a very nice, interesting way, right? My main activity I have set I've just set up my binding, right? Of course, we're still going to. I'm not going to assume. I know you've played around with binding, but of course, we're just going to use this. We're still going to go back to it, right? But just for the sake of finishing this up, right? Okay, so what we're going to do, right? So first of all, I'm going to just initialize some private variables. Of course, we could just use them directly, right? So let's just use them directly without having to create variables, right? Okay, so I'm going to create a function. Um, let me call that add constraint set. Okay, so we want to do an animation. So let's just say add constraint set animation, right? Okay, so okay, let me just do this way. Sorry, private on. So let's just create some. Let's duplicate that. We have movie status. We have a movie status, right? And we have a movie title. Just need to get out of the way. I think we also have a movie description. We have a rating. We have a rating. We also have a description button. Um, we have a root. We actually did that before, and then I think So let's see our activity main. So cover, okay, our root is our constraint layout. We don't need all the cast. Movie info, okay. Movie title, we need this. So we are getting some of these because we're going to use that to reference them in another layout, right? Okay. Rating, description button, okay. We'll, we'll get the date selector when we need it. Okay. So I think this is fine, right? Okay, so the movie starts as a text view. The text view. Same is this, same is this, same. Yeah, but our root is a constraint layout. Okay, so in this function, I'm now going to initialize them, right? So this, you could actually just, get it directly, right? You could actually just get it directly. So movie status, binding dots. I think I have a movie status. I think we called it status. Okay. So of course, like I said, you could just actually use it directly, right? But I just want to be able to. So movie status, and then we have movie title, binding dots. Let's see, movie title. The next one is the movie description. That should be this. Okay, yes, description. We have a movie rating. Should be rating. Yeah. We have a description button, and then okay, our roots will be binding dots. What roots? Okay, sorry, our description button is offside button. Right, so that should clear that out. Okay, let me just close out all the for now. Okay, I want to check the landscape. I need this guy to hover. Okay, I'm not sure I got that. No, I did not. Okay, so let's say cover image, and then cover image equal to binding dot cover. Okay, so I think we're good. Okay, it's an image button, so sorry, image button. That's why we are having that error. Okay, so cover image is an image view. Right. So whenever you duplicate stuff, you need to also be very careful. Okay, so now want to, of course, the animation wants to be able to switch between layouts, right? Want to be able to switch between what layout. So when you this is basically what one so when I click on this, right, when I click on this menu button, or when I click on this cover image, rather, when I click on this cover image, it should continue to be. Then when I click on this description button, it should now take me to the description what view, right? So, but we don't have to put them in different fragments, right? So that's not what we want to do. So let's see how can we do that. So first, I'm going to create a lower variable here to check if we are at the cover view, and I'm going to pass false. right? And I'm also going to check if we are at the description view, and I'm also going to pass false, right? So I'm just setting them to false, right? Then I'm going to create an initial constraint, right? And then get our constraint set. We started this out, right? So we're going to just finish it. Constraint set, right? And then okay, I think we have some. So we're just creating an initial constraint was set, right? And then with that object, we're going to use the clone method, right? And then we'll pass in our root. So the initial constraint, right? Initial constraint set is our root. So it takes this back. So this is was constraints was set, right? This is our root. Okay, and then we then we create a cover constraint set, right? And then the cover constraints dot clone, right? We're going to now pass in. So we can take a first of all give it a context and then r dot layout dot the cover layout, right? So clone that, right? And then can I just copy this, right? And just make this faster. So it actually is a val, so no, because I'm not actually going to modify that, right? So okay, so then the description constraint, right? Okay, so description constraints dot clone and then of course the description view, right? Okay, so we have just basically created our constraint set and then we have cloned them. So the next thing we're going to do is now we need what's it called? We need to assess a few things, right? First of all, I want to in this description view right here for the description view, we have a date and we have a day, right? So the day and the date, right? So we're going to map both of them, right? We're going to map both of them. Of course, I'm sure you know about maps, right? So I'm going to create a map, let's just say map of the days, right? And it's going to be of type map, which takes uh, two text views, right? And then this is going to be map of okay. So let me do binding dot for now. I'm just going to do day one. I'm just going to do for 3 days. You can now finish up the rest. So day one should bind to date one, right? Day two should bind to day two should bind to date two, and then of course day three should bind to date three, right? So you can actually do for the remaining days, right? But so that's just creating that. Then for the days, we're going to get the days as a list of text view, right? And then this is going to be, I just want to get the days. So our days is going to be a list of, so I'm just going to take three. You can do for the rest, binding dot day one, binding dot day two, and then of course binding dot day 3. Okay, so you can when you're doing that yours, you can actually do for the remaining number of days. So let's actually iterate over this using a for loop. So I'm going to say for day in days, right? Because I believe you understand this now. So for day in days, we want to look through day dot set on click listener. So for we're setting an on click listener on each of these days, so the day one. So let me so when this is so actually here like on this view, right? But it is when you go to the what's it called? You can actually see them in the description, right? But we're actually playing around with them now. But just more like setting a code of, we're setting the instruction, right? What to execute when you actually get to that description what view, right? Which is these guys, right? When you get here, right? When you get here. So want to do, okay, fine, when you click this, something should happen. So set on click listener, okay. So what do we want to do? I'm going to create a function, right, to select the date, right? I'm going to create a function to select the date. So we actually just want to select it, right? So select date, and then so our select date has to take two things, right? I would want it to take a day, which is a text view, and then it should take a destination constraint. Where do we want it to go to, right? Which is going to be of type constraint set. Constraint constraint set. Okay, constraint set. No, we don't have that. We're going to create that function, right? And then okay, so that's okay. Just going to copy this. So we'll pass in the day, okay, and then I'll pass in a constraint what set, right? So here let me take the function so I don't confuse you guys, right? So okay, so we're going to pass in the day, right? We're going to pass in the day. Now, the day here, well, just since we're using a lambda function, so I'm just going to say it dot the day as a text view. So I'm just going to pass to this. So we're going to pass in the day as a text view, right? And then the destination. So for the day in days, let's move to the description word constraint, right? Now I'm also going to do this for the map of days, right? We're also going to do this for the map of days, which here we're going to actually say for day in days, we're going to say let's do the day dot value, is a map, right? Day dot the value, then dot set on click listener, right? Since we're using a map, so set on click listener, and then of course we call in the select date, right? The select date method, and then we pass in the key. Remember, it's a map. We pass in the key, and then also let's pass in the description what constraint. Okay. So now let's look at this function and then see what happens, right? What exactly are we doing there? So basically what we're going to do is in this function, when it is called, right, we want the destination constraint to connect, right? We want it to connect to, first of all, the binding dot the date. We have a date selector. Our date selector is this. That date selector, can you see that from here? Okay. So these are date selector. This view, right? This view here is our date what selector, right? So we want this. We want to first of all get the ID, and then where it should actually start from. So let me show you what that means, right? So date selector dot id, right? It's a view, so we're getting the ID. That's the first thing we pass. The next thing we're going to pass in this connect function is the constraint set dot start. And then we pass in the day, right? Dot ID, get the ID of the day. And then finally, also bring in the constraint set dot what start. So this is what we do. So when this constraint, this date is called, select date function is called, we connect the destination constraint, right, with the date selector, start the constraint, get the ID, and of course, start it. So I'm going to do this. So after starting it, we also need to end it, right? We also need to end it. So here I'm going to call the constraint set of end, and then also call the constraint set of end. And then of course, finally, we'll use our transition manager. I kind of just want to transition, right? So remember, we're looking at transition also. So we have the transition manager dot begin delayed transition, right? So we'll pass in the root here, right? Begin delayed transition, we'll pass in our constraint layout, our root, right? And then we now say call our destination constraint dot apply to root. So apply this destination constraint to the root. So that's basically what this will do. Now, let's now do some clicks, right? Remember I said when we click on a particular stuff, we want to go to somewhere, right? Just and give us an animation. So let's just do that quickly so we can round up. So I'm going to, okay, let's do that here. So let's get our cover image. So our cover image, right? Dot set on click listener on the cover image. So when we click on the cover image, first of all, basically when we click on the cover image, we actually want to go to another listing layout, right? So first of all, we'll check if we are not in the cover view. So if we are in the cover view, because remember we set cover view to be false, so the negation of it. So if we are in the cover view, right, which is the cover layout, okay, or if cover view is true, right, what do we want to do? What do we want to do? If cover view is true, we'll call our transition manager dot begin delay transition, passing our root. That's what we want to begin that from. And then our cover constraint, right? Our cover constraint dot apply towards root. So apply your constraints towards the root, right? If the cover view is true. Okay. So let's do some animation, right? So I'm just going to create an anim variable object rather using our value animator, right? I'll use our value animator so we can create some animation. So I'm going to say anim dot set int values. So I want to set some int values. So let's color. Let's use black. I didn't set up some other colors, so just basically use let's just use black and white, right? And then another method we'll call is the set evaluator, right? And here you can just pass evaluator, right? These are just animation stuff we can use. Doesn't have the component, must be initialized. Okay, so let's initialize that. Okay, so then we add update listener. An update listener. Okay, so what do we want to listen for? Now, first of all, our menu button, we have, let's get our menu button. So I'm just going to say binding.menu button, right? Dot set color filter, We want to set a color filter to the menu button. So it, which is the value animator, right? Dot animated value as an integer. So we're just going to cast it as an integer. Remember, it wants to set it set color, and color they actually was integers, right? So I'm going to do this for look. Let's also do for the movie status. But movie status now will be dot set text color, right? And then that okay, so I probably do not have to. So let's do the rest. Movie title. You can also do the movie description. Okay, movie rating, and then for the description button, right? So that would actually use the set color for filter, right? For the description, it's a button, right? So that's basically that. And then of course your animation actually has to, you need to give it a duration. So I'm just going to say the duration, let's just say 300 milliseconds, right? And then you start your animation, okay? And then at this point, the cover view is what? True, and the description is the description value is now set it to what? False. So all these things happen, and then the cover view is what? True. We now set it to true, and then of course the description view we set it to what? False. So we're going to do the same thing for the menu button and the description button. Remember, we want to click here, right? And then we want to click the cover image, right? And then on the cover layout, we also want to click this, and then on the description view, we also want to be able to click this guy to take us back. So we just want to be able to do some transitions, right? So I'm gonna just copy this, and then we'll make some changes. Okay, so instead of the cover image, right? Let's now work with the menu button. I'm just going to say binding dot menu button. Okay, so here we're also going to check if it's cover view, but we're going to check if its cover view is true, right? If it's actually true, then we also do our transition manager. We delay that, apply the initial constraint, right? Set. So we apply that to the word root. Okay, we now apply it to the root, which is our constraint layout, right? And then, of course, all these other things, we can actually leave them. But I'm just going to switch this from white, and then here should be black, right? Every other thing can actually just, stay the way it is, okay? But of course, now this cover view now has to be false because we are no longer on the cover view. And we're setting it to, okay, yeah, menu, we're going to, okay, so the cover view now is false, right? Description view still remains what? False, right? But let me just also do this, right? So if its cover view is that, right? But else, let's add an else here. Or we can just say an else if it is description view. Sorry about that, else if it's actually a description view, what should happen? We'll basically just do this, right? Basically just do this, right? And then set this guy. So we don't need the whole these whole guys anymore, right? So if the description view is actually true, right? So just go back to the initial if this description view, remember the initial value is what? The initial value is what? False. So that means we are not in the description view. So just take us to the initial constraints without any of these, color filters and all those stuff, right? Okay, and then of course the last one, which is the description button. When we click on that, okay. So First of all, so since we're in description, so if it is true, that is not the negation of its description view, which we set to false before, right, initially. So now, if it is true, we need to get our description word constraints to be applied to the word root, right? And of course, after doing that, before I'm going to wrap this whole code, right? Because I also need to check if the description view is true, then go to the description word constraints, right? I think I didn't copy everything I need to copy. Let's see. Okay, let me get on here. So I also need to check, or I also want to check if this cover view is false, right? Because the initial value is false. So is it false? If it is, right, then it means that we are in the description word view, and then apply this whole animation, right? And then set its cover view to what false. Just set its cover view to what false, and then we are good to go, right? And then outside of this if statement, right, I'll now set that the description view is true. I'll set that to true because it's now true. So that's actually just to that's how we play around with the constraint set. So let's apply this and then see what we have, right? Let's apply this and then see what we have. So while that is running, if I think I'm just going to take, is there a question? Is there a question? Someone asked the question. What shortcut did you use? Do you use there? Sorry, where exactly? Sultan, where exactly?
I don't get you.
You asked a question on the chat. You said
Okay,
what
okay.
shortcuts?
Okay, you were copying the codes like the way you copied it all together, like line by line.
Okay, that's Control D,
Control E.
right? When you click on it, the end of the line, when you click on the end of the line and just do Control D,
Okay, okay. You put it on this. You put the code on the second line.
whichever line, if you place your code here and do Control D, it actually duplicates it for you.
Okay,
You can also highlight and do Control D, it will also duplicate it for you. I don't want to do
okay,
that while the is running.
okay.
Yes. Okay. Any other question? Any question? Any question? We're rounding up actually. Just need to test this out and then we call it uh, a day, and then we'll just have a brief conversation. Okay. Okay. So let's see. So apologies, my emulator has been dragging a bit, so just bear with me. Okay. So I should think. Okay. So let's see. Let's see. Let's see. Okay. So when you click on the cover view, sorry, my monitor is really dragging a bit. Okay. Don't think it has run yet. So let me close this and open it again. Okay. So let's see. Let's see. Okay. So my undershoot is actually dragging. So I think probably and don't want to drag this. So I think I'll leave you guys to clone and then run that and let's see how that goes, right, on your end. I think you should be able to tell me the interaction. It's actually um, hanging. Okay, so the reason is not actually what. Okay, so we have not actually called this function. So I'm gonna do that quickly. Right, so that should solve that. Okay, that should solve that. Let's test it out now and see how far. Building. Okay, so yeah, so when you click on that, it takes you to the cover page, it takes you to the description, and then you can click on the day and a few small ones, so you can do for the rest of the day and the date, right? So that's basically how that works, right? Okay, so yeah, so that's that, right? Thank you very much, guys. I'll see you in our next class. Thank you.